I've loved the desert my entire life. I really love the vistas of sand and rock, and in Texas, a lot of the desert has sort of scrubby plant life, right? These sort of barely seeming alive bushes and trees that look like they died about 10 years ago, but they're not actually. I love, too, that in the desert you can see for miles and miles and miles. When Kristen and I moved back here to this part of the world, I told her that it's sort of oppressively green here. That I feel like sometimes the trees are about to pounce on me because it's so claustrophobic. I know, I'm talking to a bunch of East Coasters there, so maybe you feel differently. Anyway, the defining feature of the desert, at least from a geographical and ecological standpoint, is that it gets so little rain. The general guideline is that deserts get less than 250 millimeters, which is 10 inches more or less, of precipitation annually. To give a comparison, Newark gets about 45 inches a year on average. A rainforest gets anywhere between 79 inches and 394 inches annually. So 10 inches of water a year or less is very little. And of course, some deserts, for instance, I'm really interested in the Atacama Desert in Chile, averages about 1 millimeter of rainfall a year. That's 4/100ths of an inch, give or take. And the thing that really fascinates me about that is that even there, in the driest place on Earth, there's life. Some species live sort of at the edges, but all of them are adapted to this basic lack of water. And in the few areas where streams do collect what water there is from these large, mostly empty stretches, or that comes down from the mountains, plants and animals thrive. There's even small villages out in the middle of the desert in these tiny green oases. And so water, even in the relatively tiny amounts present there, is essential, of course, and a defining feature of everyday life. So the desert is defined by its relationship to water, but then so is all life, at least life as we know it. All life forms depend on water. Without it, life doesn't exist. Which brings me back around to today and our water ceremony. We've celebrated the water ceremony. It was created in 1980 by Carolyn McDade and Lucille Shuck Longview. It's intended to be a way to show our unity, how we come together as a group, much like the combined waters mingle into one larger body. And I love water as a metaphor for many, many things. In our Time for All Ages today, we talked about how water changes and moves while retaining something of its essential nature. From a scientific perspective, we might talk about the fact that water molecules are always water molecules, even if they look and act differently depending on how warm it is and other things. What a great metaphor this is, though, for each of us, that we change and we grow, we age, we move. But there's something of our essential you-ness of who you are that never changes. You are always you, even if the you that you are changes, to put it sort of confusingly. And water is like so many other things in our life, too, that it's both life-giving, but also potentially quite dangerous. Or to put it a different way, it's good and bad, depending. The context matters a lot. Because in the desert, rain can be a blessing. It provides the materials for making life. But if you get too much or too quickly, you have a flood and a washout in gullies that were dry minutes ago. It's actually very dangerous. And though it can seem strange to drown in a desert, it happens regularly. In short, too much water is as big a problem as too little. Floods can kill people and destroy communities. Tsunamis wreak havoc over hundreds of miles of coastline. I mentioned Houston here recently. I'm a graduate of the University of Houston. I lived and went to school there for about 5 years. And it's a place that's vibrant and joyful in many ways, but it's also one plagued by various problems, like most places are. But one of those problems is that the entire city and surrounding area is basically half swamp and half coastal plain. And all of that is prone to flooding when too much rain comes too quickly, and it does, with alarming regularity, in fact. So water is, and I'm arguing today, the probably the most powerful force on earth. In this part of the world, near us, that power has long been tapped to power mills for processing lumber or grain or to run factories. In my neighborhood, and I know up here too, it seems like every third street is named for the mill that the street used to run to. And and we're experiencing that power in new and frightening ways, of course, as climate change melts ice caps, raises the level of the ocean, increases the power of tropical storms, increases the volume of rains in some areas, while making others experience drought. Parts of Maryland are experiencing drought conditions this year, which is a rarity for that part of the world. But I think so much of our life is like this, is balancing between extremes, right? I was trying to think of examples of this, and I thought of a couple, and I'm sure you could think of more in your own life. In the right amount, you may know that salt is a crucial component of a healthy diet. If you do not have any salt in your body, you die. But of course, too much, and it's also bad for you. And the truth is that you could say this about virtually anything you eat. In the correct amount, it's probably good. In too little or too much, it can be bad. I was thinking, of course, too, about chemotherapy, which is basically a way to poison your body, but in a very specific way and amount, which is intended to destroy the cancer while hurting the rest of you as little as possible. And no doubt, as I said, you have other examples in your own life of these things that we have to keep in balance. In fact, I think humans are something we need to keep in balance. We are capable of great beauty and goodness, but also destruction, and I'll even say evil. This gets back to the nature of humanity, which is something you hear about a lot when you're in divinity school. I don't believe in original sin. I don't think that humans are somehow cursed to do bad things from birth. But I also don't believe, as I heard some people say, that humans are innately good. I've met too many humans to believe that, to be honest. If you've been around children much in your life, you know that, for instance, they can be sweet and lovely, but also manipulative and self-centered little things, which I'll just point out is pretty much the same way that adults can be. Instead, I don't buy into either one of those, but I think we are, and that we have all of that in us, the possibility of those things. And so what I like to call it is original potential, that we have the potential to do all sorts of things. And over time, we gain the understanding, hopefully, that some things are good and some aren't, and some are neither. And most things, in fact, are a complicated mix. We have great potential for good or ill, and potential for a lot of in-between, too. Like water, we are shaped by our surroundings, and we shape them. We change and move, not always in the ways we would desire. And so the water ceremony I love each year. It tells me that it's that time of year in our community. It makes me think about the water ceremonies I've been to before, about the people I've known, about some of the places I've been to. But the water ceremony, in at least one of its meanings, is about the way we join together to make a community that is each of us, but also all of us together. And once we've been joined together, we're always affected by the others we have been in community with. And we carry some of that with us. Just as once these waters have been joined, there's always a little bit of all of that water in any sample that we try to take from it. And so when I think about that, what makes me think is the question is, what will we do together then? What will we use all that potential for? What will we work for and advocate in our own lives, but in our community too, and in the world? How can we support one another and make this world a better place? Or I suppose we could choose a worse place if we're really going to be honest about potential. And that means we have to be careful about what we support because we have the potential for so much and so much more together than any of us apart. So friends, I know that's a lot today to think about the power of water and the power of community. Both of them have such great potential, and used right can be life-giving and sustaining. So may we use that power for good. And today, may we go about our lives thinking about the water and the communities of which we swim in. So may it be.